Hello, and welcome to today's Opt to Thrive Manage Your Mind Mindful Moment.
Welcome to Opt to Thrive, your go-to podcast for women's wellness in midlife, designed to educate, support, and inspire you to live your very best life. And now your host, Dr. Karina Sims.
I was on my walk this morning. I love my morning walks. Love watching the world wake up, the birds singing, the sun coming up. It's a pretty amazing time. It always reminds me to just, take a second, take a breath, have a look around, and remember that life is constantly evolving. But this morning on my walk, I was listening to a podcast where a man named Frank Bruni was being interviewed about a book that he wrote called The Beauty of Dusk. The book was essentially about the insights that he gained from having had a very unusual stroke that left him with a visual impairment out of one of his eyes. He was talking about his perspective, about how when it first happened, he found himself thinking of what life looked like for him now and the limitations and the frustrations that he was having, along with the worry that this could happen again, that he could lose his vision in his other eye. And then he talked about catching himself in those thoughts and making a decision to change his perspective. He found a way of looking at his situation and at life in general, really that was much more optimistic. It reminded me of the many experiences I've had in my work where I've seen people with what we would all agree would be horrific circumstances or tragedies, either losing people they love or having been abused or mistreated or having some kind of injury or health issue. And I've always been really fascinated with how people respond to these challenges in life. There are people who just get on with it. It's, it is what it is. There's no sense in spinning in it. And then there are the people who, 20 years later, are still absolutely stuck. They just cannot move forward or see anything else in life. Their whole life is clouded by what had happened, by their experiences, by their trauma. They're so focused on whatever this thing is that they refuse to live. Their entire life is completely overshadowed and defined by it. Now, I have had many people say to me on many occasions that they're surprised at what I've managed to do with my life, given some of the obstacles and the challenges that I've had along the way. And this story today made me reflect a little bit more on that and on optimism in particular. Because I really do, and I have always thought that optimism is definitely one of the traits that have helped me overcome the things that I've overcome in my life. Now, I have always pretty much allowed myself to have what I like to call a pity party when I get dealt with some type of blow in life. So yeah, this is crap and poor me, but then it's time to get up, dust myself off, and get on with it. What are the positives that I can see here? I can choose to let whatever it is define me. I can allow it to choose my path for me. I can give my power to it, or I can choose to take that bull by the horns and do whatever I can to sort it out. I can focus on how crap it is, but that keeps me stuck. Or worse yet, it keeps me going backwards. I don't want to be stuck. I don't want to go backwards. We only get one go, and I don't want to waste any significant amount of my time stuck in negativity. Why? Why would I want that? I want to find the sunshine and I want to head in that direction. So I had to look at what we know about optimism because I've often wondered, is this something that people can learn? Because we all know people who seem to be just kind of naturally very pessimistic. It turns out that there are those in the field of psychology, in particular positive psychology, who do believe optimism can be learned. Positive psychology thinks of learned optimism as being about how we interpret the world, that it's not a fixed trait or even part of our disposition, but instead they see it as kind of like a type of life strategy. It's an outlook that we can develop, in particular by challenging our automatic negative thoughts. Apparently, there are 3 really common, what we call cognitive distortions, or the term I prefer is thought errors. It's just a thought error. And we can apparently target these to help develop our optimism. The first one is personalization. And so this is when we take responsibility for things that are outside of our control, or we believe that everything is related to us, even if it's not, or in particular that something is related to us when it's not. So an example would be if you went to a party and, maybe the people seem a little bit distant, you might think, oh, they're not talking to me because they don't like me, even though they might just be tired or preoccupied or, something else. Here you're personalizing their behavior as if it's all about you. Now, I have done this a lot in the past with my husband in particular, who often withdraws when he's stressed. And I'd often relate it to something I had done and think that maybe he was mad at me, when in reality, it had nothing to do with me. Now I let him use his words if he has an issue with something I've done. Even if my brain jumps to asking myself what I did, if there isn't anything obvious, then I give him space. And I remind myself that there are like a gazillion other things going on in his life other than me. And if he wants to talk about it, he will. Often, like me, he just needs some time and space to sort it out in his own head. And as I said, I can relate to this. Then there are people who prefer to talk through an issue with someone. And that someone may be totally unrelated to the issue, but they just kind of need to work through it. And that's helpful for some people. So I think for this one, it's to catch yourself when you're taking something personally and really just taking some time to challenge the thought. Is this really true? Could it be something else? Is it really all about me? The second one is permanence. This is when you believe that things are always going to be the same. They're never going to improve, or they're never going to get worse, like thinking that your honeymoon period's always going to stay the same. Then you're in for a really rude awakening, right? I remember growing up and having arguments with my bestie, and I would think, that's it. We're never going to be friends again. Or it could be something like you fail at doing something, trying something new, and you think, I'm never going to be good at this. Or you fail a test and you think, that's it. It's the end of my academic career. I'm not going to pass the course. So here you're seeing the failure as permanent, and it's not acknowledging that you can improve with effort, or that it's just one setback. It's not the whole picture. I quite frequently remind myself of the impermanence of life. For instance, that my young adult children, who still keep in reasonably regular contact with me, but even that has decreased as the years march on, that there's going to be a time, most likely, when they get married, they have families of their own, where that contact is even less. And so just trying to really savor and be very present for the time that I do get with them, either on the phone or in person. I'm also really mindful that my body is not always going to function the way it is. And so I try to look after it the best I can and appreciate all that it can do. So just, being mindful of impermanence, which is pretty much the opposite of this thought error where you are thinking of things as being permanent without probably realizing that you're doing it. The third thought error is pervasiveness. And this is when you believe that one bad thing affects everything. Like one little negative thing clouds the whole situation. You have an argument with a friend or your partner, or you have an encounter at work and you think, everything in my life's falling apart. Nothing's going right. Or this whole day, just a write-off. What a terrible day. Or you didn't perform well in one part of a project, and so you just write the whole project off. People are telling you that you did a great job, and you think, no, the whole thing's a write-off because you did that one little bit poorly or not up to your standard. So again, just trying to catch ourselves when we want to just write the whole whatever it is off and remind ourselves it doesn't have to be like that. It can just be what it is. I had a negative encounter at work, but the rest of the day was pretty good. I had an argument with a friend or my partner, but we'll sort it out. So these 3 thought errors can make our problems feel much bigger and much more overwhelming than they actually are. And if we can identify them, it really can help us to think more realistically and help us find better solutions and improve our optimistic outlook. I hope you've enjoyed this Manage Your Mind mindful moment. And if you have, and you can think of someone else who might enjoy it, please pass it on. And don't forget to rate and review the podcast to make it more visible to those who might get something out of it too. Have a great week, everyone. And until then, I hope you opt to thrive.
The Opt to Thrive podcast is designed for information purposes only and is not engaged in the giving of medical advice. The information provided on the podcast should not be used for diagnosing or treating a health problem or disease. In no way should the information provided by Opt to Thrive be considered medical advice, and at all times the advice of a medical professional should supersede recommendations from Opt to Thrive. If you have or suspect you may have a health problem, you should consult your healthcare provider. The views expressed in this podcast are purely that of Dr. Sims and do not in any way reflect those of the institutions she contracts her medical services to.
Thank you for listening to Opt to Thrive. If you've enjoyed listening, please rate and share the podcast. You can visit our website at optothrive.com and leave a comment for any subjects you would like to hear more about.